If you pretend that everyone that works for you is a volunteer, that's just giving you their time out of the goodness of their heart, and that they are bright and that they have so much to offer, if you treat them in that way, from that orientation, you will suddenly see them volunteering things that you could not buy with their salary, because you can get things done. But the goal, the orientation, if you shift to, how do I make this person want to do things? If that is your goal, how do I make him want to be on time? How do I make him want, fill in the blank, use more creativity or put their heart into it? Those are things you cannot buy, and those are things that you can tap into if you become a master at the wording you choose.
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leadership, where we explore smart thinking, strong relationships, and leadership that truly works. And remember, for free resources to help you in your leadership journey, go to leadership.net. That's leadership.net. For this episode, I'm pleased to welcome Heather Linchenko. Heather was raised in a Christian home in Idaho, the 8th of 10 children. She served as a missionary in Belgium and France. Then she married a man from communist Russia who grew up with one sibling in an atheist home. Now there's a laboratory for learning to navigate relationships. For many years, Heather worked closely with our mutual friend, Stephen R. Covey, who wrote the iconic book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Now there's another laboratory for learning. Heather is a communication strategist and author of her own book titled, I Meant Well, and Other Words That Kill Relationships. Heather offers a masterclass in emotional nuance, revealing how well-intended phrases often mask control, deflection, or fear. In this conversation, we'll explore the hidden dynamics of everyday language, the cost of conversational shortcuts, and how leaders, partners, and parents can speak with more clarity, courage, and care. If you've ever said, I was just trying to help, and watched a relationship unravel, this episode is for you. Heather Linchenko, welcome to Leadership.
Oh, Roger, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
I'm looking forward to this. Now, your book's subtitle, Words That Kill Relationships, is certainly provocative. Could you unpack what you mean by that, and how do words that seem harmless still end up being destructive?
Well, as you said, I grew up in a very large family, also a very large extended family, and I was the youngest of 10 children. And so I became an observer. I wasn't really supposed to talk much because I was so young, but I watched. And what I began to notice is that people would say different things to a person behind their back, about a person behind their back, than to the person. And there was just always this disconnect, kind of a pretending thing that was going on. And I learned from this experience just how damaging a person saying, I meant well, or my intentions were good, was damaging to a relationship. In fact, just naming this book, by what I did, I've had a lot of people have kind of visceral reactions to it that triggers them, either because they've heard it too many times and have not seen change. It's kind of an excuse for change. Basically, it's the meaning behind every explanation. People, when they mean well and they get a negative reaction to it, they want to explain themselves. And people don't want an explanation. They want change. I've seen many, many relationships killed, literally killed, little by this attitude of, if something's wrong between us, you need to change your perception because my heart is right. I mean well. So the problem is on your side.
So what are some of the most common well-meant phrases that you see people using that actually erode trust or connection?
So when you go to school and you're learning English, you don't need a class on which words are negative and which words are positive. The negative words are infused with energy, and they're the ones that make us feel bad or sad or mad. And they bring us down. They're discouraging. Now, on the opposite end, we have positive words. They're the words that fill us with encouragement. And so when you ask what phrases people use, I want to focus in on which words we use. Are we using words that discourage in order to motivate people? For example, that's irresponsible. You might say that to someone. That word is charged with negative energy. So in effect, we're trying to motivate through discouragement. So that is the first thing that I always tell people to work on, is rather than describing, we want to get away from describing to what we want. When I counsel people, they're always telling me, describing the situation. And I often say to them, what do you want? And the interesting thing is that they don't know. It takes them a minute to figure it out. And if they do figure it out, it's usually, I want more respect. But I'll say, what does that look like? And they don't know. So if we don't even know what we want, we only know what we don't want, we're never going to get what we want.
This is taking me back many years, just before my wife and I were married, more than 58 years ago. We had this little conversation, and I hadn't thought about it in years, but it went something like this. I asked her, I said, we really love each other. We want to be happy. Let's talk about how we're going to argue, because we're going to disagree on something sometime about how to raise children, how to manage money. I mean, the list goes on. How are we going to manage that conversation? And then we decided that we would listen carefully to each other, not with the intent of responding, but with the intent of understanding. And then we would give the other person the opportunity to express his or her viewpoint. And then we would agree that we would expect and assume the very best of motivations from each other. I'm telling you, Heather, that one conversation has made all the difference in the world.
Yes, it's creating a good foundation before you ever begin. I really hope that people will read this book at the beginning of relationship, at the beginning of a partnership, at the beginning, and not to fix, but to pave the way by making those decisions early. It really does make a tremendous difference, the timing of that.
Well, I've read your book, and I think it would make a great wedding gift to people.
I've done that. And I've had a lot of people tell me, I wish I had read this at the beginning of raising children, at the beginning of starting my business.
Right. Well, it's never too late.
It's never too late.
So what you're talking about has a lot to do with self-awareness, which is important in every kind of relationship. Let me ask, how does emotional safety in relationships get compromised by the language we use, even when the speakers think they're being helpful? What about emotional safety?
Well, what I've found is that most of the relationship mistakes we make, and I use that term relationship mistakes, anything that causes an erosion of the relationship is a relationship mistake. And so whenever we make a relationship mistake, usually it's completely naively. We don't know what we've done. And that's why we just watched Jump to, but I meant so well. My heart was so good. And I experienced this myself with my daughter. I was raising her the same way I was raised, with a lot of parental authoritative control. And the only thing I got from that was less of what I wanted. The more I tried for what I wanted, the less I got of it. And this was just so surprising to me because, having been taught, typed the book, edited the book of Stephen so many times with him, I knew those principles so well. And I was able to live them quite well out in society, whether it was with a boss or a peer or a fellow employer or a roommate or something, or a fellow employee. But when I got into the position of leadership, it fell apart. And then what I learned from that experience is, why can't I live these Covey principles? And I also noticed a lot of people that would teach the Covey principles, but I never saw them live it in relation to me if they had a leadership position over me. And so leadership gets in the way of living good principles. So what I found is that I learned and learned and learned. I read books upon books, trying to figure out what was wrong. And when I finally figured out, it's because of what I need to unlearn. I need to unlearn things that come with leadership before the things I've learned can take root and pull me forward in those relationships. I found there were a lot of lies in my mind.
Yes. Well, for someone in a leadership role, what are the subtle signals that they might be sending through their words or phrases that undermine their team's engagement or trust? What are some of those subtle signals?
Think of a person who is coming to work for you as a volunteer. You're not paying them. Think of how you treat that person. Now think of someone that you pay very well. Think of how you treat that person. There are subtle cues based on if we think a person owes us something. They're very subtle, but they're very real. People can feel it. And if you think of it in terms of that, a volunteer versus a paid employee, or a teacher's aide, for example, how do you treat the children versus how a parent treats their children? There is a vast difference there. And so the first time I learned this was I was just struggling with relationships within my home, certain relationships where people were not just obedient to my authoritative ways. And I went into this little public or private school as a teacher's aide. And suddenly I could live the principles I knew. Suddenly, I was living all the Covey principles I knew so well. But at home, I couldn't do it. And so I realized from this experience, and I had so much joy working with those children. It became my most favorite pastime to see how encouraging I could be to them, to see what kind of, I call them forward-facing words, the words that contain the positive energy, the words of things that can yet be accomplished, and never using the words of how something has failed. And I think that's one of the reasons those words are so damaging, is because they talk about the past. Lazy, dirty, ugly, late. We use these words routinely, but they're talking about the past, and there's no agency in the past. So I like to say the answer is always in the future. Time. Figure out how to say when a word comes into your mind, you almost become this translator, like you're learning a new language. It always comes to you, usually naturally, as some kind of a complaint. But you can take a moment and translate that into, what is it that I want? What is a positive word that I can use? And then you feel the joy. I felt power in that little classroom. I had kids changing personalities. I had obedient, great little kids that would lighten up and learn to enjoy life better. And kids that were too cool for school, that decided to check out so that they could have a whole different persona because they didn't want to try. I saw them saying, "Can I do math? Can I do it with you?" Because I had learned how to make them feel smart. I had learned how to use my words in a way that provided them energy and courage to excel. And then I went home, and what did I do? It was because of fear. I had a daughter tell me one time, "It's all about your ego, Mom." And guess what? That made me mad because I thought she was being disrespectful to call your parent out on their ego. Well, I learned that she was right, because that's where the fear comes from. How my children turned out were going to reflect on me. How those kids at the school turned out was going to reflect on their parents, not on me. And so I became very effective. And so then what I did is I came home and I had to pretend. I played a pretend game that I wasn't their mother, that I was at school, I was this teacher's aide, and I was going to treat them that way. And everything changed from the orientation within my mind. So if you're in a leadership role, if you pretend that everyone that works for you is a volunteer, that's just giving you their time out of the goodness of their heart, and that they are bright and that they have so much to offer, if you treat them in that way, from that orientation, you will suddenly see them volunteering things that you could not buy with their salary, because you can get things done. You can get things done as a parent. You can make your kids do things. You can make your employees do things. But the goal, the orientation, if you shift to, how do I make this person want to do things? If that is your goal, how do I make him want to be on time? How do I make him want, fill in the blank, use more creativity, or put their heart into it? Those are things you cannot buy, and those are things that you can tap into if you become a master at the wording you choose.
Well, and what you said is that it's really about your orientation with that individual. And another way to look at it, and you didn't use these words, but I think you'll agree with them, the children are the children of God, whether they are literally in your family or somebody else's family. If they're in your family, you have been entrusted with their care. And when you think of that relationship in that context, it has a tendency to help us self-edit a little better. And you talked about editing yourself in the moment. And that changes your habit. That changes your orientation toward the relationship. And that's when the children started to open up. And I mean, I can picture some child coming to you and asking if he could do some math with you. I mean, that's quite a shift in behavior, it seems to me.
Well, and guess what? This brought me joy.
This
brought my effort with wording, my pretending that my kids were not my kids, enabled me to make that slow progress in my wording choice to where I had different kids. I had no idea how much I had been in the way of their progress from the choice of wording that I used. And over time, I kept adding to it and adding to it. The first one was the forward-facing words, or the positive, the energy or encouraging words. That's the first one I found. But then I found others, and over time, there were 9 components to encouraging communication that I was able to find. And as far as editing yourself, just like if you're going to learn the violin or the piano, if you have to learn that yourself, and instead of from someone who's been there before you, like I had to do, it took me decades to figure these things out and to repair my relationships. But if you have a teacher that can tell you what to do, then you can put that into practice and see results with immediately. And of course, just like with practicing piano or any type of skill, there are going to be many mistakes that you will make, which is no big deal if you've taken on this challenge. And so we can orient ourselves to the practice of relationship work as similar to the practice of dentistry or learning to type or learning to ski or anything. Mistakes are important to make to get to mastery. And so there's something that I like to tell people. First of all, they need to accept that mistakes are good by looking at relationships alongside of every other skill you might learn. And you realize that way that you cannot learn a skill without them.
Well, that speaks to the importance of having psychological safety Making it safe to make a mistake, making it safe to stub your toe, if you will. That's part of getting better.
Yes, that's right.
Your change initiative has the budget. The strategy looks solid, and everyone's nodding along in the meetings. But for some reason, it's going nowhere. Dr. Roger Dean Duncan knows why. After 40 years in the trenches with top business leaders, he knows that change fails when organizations lack the right foundations: trust, accountability, and real communication. Dr. Duncan's free 10-minute assessment shows you exactly where your organization stands. Answer a few straightforward questions that reveal your true change readiness level. Don't waste months discovering the hard way. Get your free assessment today at leadershop.net/change. Again, that's leadershop.net/change.
Let me share with you one lie that I found within my psyche that I was taught, it's handed to us from society, that got in the way of my progress, of my relationship health with my children and with others that were in my circles. And that is that it's a good move to ignore body language. Think about if you're a parent and your child is got slumped shoulders and puffing air out and putting their head down. We think as parents, we believe the lie that we should ignore this and say, sorry, you just have to do it. Life is hard, buck up. Where that is reasonable. That's a reasonable mindset to have. But that mindset won't tap into all those things that you want the people in your life to volunteer. You want them to buy your goods, so to speak.
Right.
You want them to buy, to be wanting to buy your knowledge, your wisdom, your guidance. Just like if you're a business owner, you treat your customers way different, usually, naturally, than you treat your employees. But what if you treated everyone as if they were your customers and you want them to buy something? Usually, you take the responsibility on yourself. You don't say, hey, you're not buying what I've got on my shelves. What's wrong with you? You need to start buying.
You can't scold them.
You can't scold them. You can't do anything except for look into yourself. How can I be more creative with my window dressings? Is the price too low? Is the price too high? We just take it upon ourselves to do the changing within the employer-customer relationship until we get results that those customers want to buy from us. And so we just use that same thing in relationships. And again, like I said, people will make a lot of mistakes, but this is what I tell people to do about mistakes, other than just accepting that they're good and part of the process, is a retake. So, for example, if you've got someone making a movie and they don't like the scene, they won't just move forward with the movie, right? They stop.
Right.
They recalibrate. They say what they want, and the people redo it. And so, as I was learning these skills as a mother, I would say it wrong because I'd be frustrated. I'd say it in a negative way and in a discouraging way. All you have to do is say, oops, let me try that again. Right. That's not really how I wanted to say it.
Nobody's going to say, no, I like that negative stuff. Let's just stick with that.
Oh, but we do that. We, as leaders, we do that because we don't want to let go of our authority.
Right.
We think it's going to somehow undermine it. This is something I really learned from Stephen Covey, is that he did treat me like a volunteer. He treated me like he didn't pay me in, like I had other things to do, but I was choosing to help him. And it was very, very unique and different from any other job that I had had to that point. And I was a very good employee at my other jobs. I might have become more efficient at filing, or more this or more that of what I was already good at. But under his mindset, under his treatment of me, his very careful treatment of me, even as a leader, I found resources within myself that came to be. And I found myself wanting to do more for him. I wanted to make his life easier. I wanted to step out into my fears and take burdens off of him rather than waiting for him to ask me to do it. And that required me to grow from a secretarial position to someone who was working with the leadership of companies. Just as this little 25-year-old girl that was inexperienced, I stepped into that role because I wanted to volunteer more because of how this person made me feel.
Well, you're sort of addressing the next question I had, and that is, in the context of leadership, how can a leader foster a culture, an operating culture, where words are aligned with values and actions, not just good intentions? It sounds to me as though you experienced that kind of culture working with Stephen R. Covey.
Yes, I did. And if you think about the difference between intentions and outcome or impact, we don't pay. No one pays for intentions. We don't pay our employees because of their intentions. Our customers don't pay us because of our intentions. The only pay comes when we deliver and there's an impact. The better the impact, the more people are willing to reward us for that. And so I'm just wanting to put this template over relationships that what we want from relationships is pay. We want joy. We don't want stress. We want the joy. That is the pay that we will get if we apply these principles across the board.
So what are some questions that teams should be asking themselves about their communication habits to check whether they are harming connection? How can a team establish a culture of openness with each other so that they don't get all hung up with good intentions? They're treating each other the way they would like to be treated. How do they get started with that?
Well, a very good way is what you just explained with your wife, the conversation you had with your wife about how are we going to do this, and making a decision, not top down, but getting everyone's buy-in. That to me is critical. We think as leaders that that is too time consuming to get the buy-in of people. You know, even down to the lowest positions in the company, if we get people's buy-in, that takes time, that takes effort, but it doesn't add time or effort. It's an exchange of time and effort, because then we avoid all the negativity traps, we avoid all the backbiting, we avoid the conflict and the problems in a great degree if we will choose to spend our time up front and saying, hey, we want to change our company culture. And here's some things that I propose. Is there something you want to add to it? I did this with my children, by the way. I'm like, at one point, I said, what do you want our family to stand for? Everyone put their things in, their ideas in, and we discussed it until we got it down to 7 things, I think. And we fleshed them out. Everyone was in alignment. And then we could refer to these later if we wanted to. So starting a good foundation that way is a very good thing to do. Like if a parent wants to change their management style, they might actually say to their kids, I'm trying to learn to be a different type of leader, a different type of parent. So there's going to be some differences, and look forward to that. I want to learn how to be a more encouraging parent. Okay, so that's one thing. The next thing is what I call the relationship number. So what you do is you ask everyone on your team, all your employees, 2 questions. One question is, how valued do you feel as an employee of this company? Or if it's a child, how valued do you feel by me on a scale of 1 to 10? They will give you a number, sometimes down to the decimal of what that is. And it's like they don't even know why they're saying it, but they're saying it. And that's how you tell the health of a relationship. The second question is, how safe do you feel to say anything to me that's on your mind and heart, including giving difficult feedback? How safe do you feel? So how valued, how safe? Then, after they give you those numbers, you ask them, what's one thing I could do differently? Start doing, stop doing. What's one thing I could do differently that would raise that number for you? they will have an answer for you. And then you go to work on that one thing. You forget everything else. You don't try and get to a 10 overnight. You get it to the next level. And if you do this on a regular basis with each other, I had one business owner tell me that he had spent gobs of money trying to do all these diagnostic things and how to fix relationships. And it was very complicated, very expensive. And he said he had more success with these few little questions than with anything else he'd ever done. And what he found out was a lot of his employees gave him the exact same feedback. He said he felt like getting in a fetal position for a while because he had no idea, because
he had blind spots.
He had blind spots. People still treated him well because he's such a good guy. He meant so well, but they had problems. If a person's asking, what can I do? It eliminates two typical problems: nagging or withdrawal, emotional withdrawal. And so that's a quick way, the quickest way that I know of to change a culture is to begin asking what you can do, and don't expect other people to do it. You set the tone as a leader. Don't say, now you guys do it. If you're doing it with your spouse, you wouldn't say, what's my number? Until you could get your number up high enough you felt you could do that.
Yeah. Well, we've all seen companies all over the world who establish mission, vision, and values statements. Sometimes they actually live by them. Often they don't, frankly. The words are just on a poster in the employee cafeteria, and they don't really live by them to the extent that they think they do. But some of the most successful families I've observed have done some of the same thing. They will create, and they call them different things, but a mission, vision, and values statement for the family. And even with small children, they get very excited about being involved in that. Maybe one of their values is kindness, and they'll ask the children, okay, what would that look like? What would kindness look like? If I, as your daddy, am kind to you, what kind of things would that be? And if you're kind to your sister, what would that look like? Those conversations are priceless, and they're actually fairly simple. It's amazing for a lot of folks, it just doesn't occur to them to have that conversation.
This brings up another point, because most people can set this great foundation, but then they don't know how to uphold it because they got the orientation of, hey, you're supposed to be kind. Remember, we talked about kindness?
It's on that poster on the refrigerator door. What's your problem?
Yeah. So what I advocate to change that is what I call going solo. You live the principles without teaching them, without correcting. And when you decide to go solo, you realize quickly how much you've been expecting of others and how little you've been expecting of yourself. One of the biggest deterrents for growth that I've found is teaching. We think if we're teaching, this was my problem with applying the Covey habits. I knew them so well that when my kids would behave a certain way, I would teach them rather than living them on my own side without the teaching. And so modeling is an extraordinarily effective way of teaching. It's slower. No, it's not. It seems slower, but it's faster. If you get some kind of a handle on your skills, get your relationship numbers with your kids up, and to where you can have more influence on them and you can have more give and take. But you can't get give and take from a child if your relationship number with them is low, or an employee. And so I want to tell you this story about this one particular businessman that I taught just this relationship number thing and going solo. And he came and reported back to me. He said, you changed my life. You saved my son's life. And then he started to explain his relationship with his son was terrible. His son was just slamming doors. His whole attention was with his friend group. His friends were pulling him down. He was on the verge of suicide. And his friends would say, I love you. He'd say, love you. But when his dad said, love you, son, he'd say nothing. And so he didn't know what to do. All his efforts, he meant so well, obviously. He wanted so badly to help his son. But until he decided to go solo, ask for the relationship number, things couldn't improve. No matter if you've got a mission statement or not, it's not going to improve unless you have the ability as a leader to go solo, to live these principles, to take upon yourself this challenge. I call it a heroic challenge to grow when no one around you is growing, to go to the gym, though you don't have anyone going to the gym with you, to wait until someone else is willing to do the work alongside you is to remain weak. And so to take that going solo thing seriously as a leadership effort. And I love teaching these principles to leaders and business owners specifically because they understand what it's like to be the only one doing things. You take the hits as a leader. You are the one that's not paid if there's not enough money, not someone else. You take all those hits because you're the leader. And you don't expect everyone in your organization to take those same hits. And so this man, he said, "How valued do you feel by me?" His son told him 8.5. He thought it was a 2. By how his son treated him, by the amount of influence he had, he was shocked in the best way. His love was getting through. Then he said, "How safe do you feel with me, telling me anything that's on your mind and heart?" And that number was very low. He said, "What's one thing I can do to improve that number?" His son said, "Buy me Capri Suns and lollipops." And to this man's credit, he didn't say, "Now come on here, I'm being serious. Give me something serious to work with." He said, "Okay." And he went out, and for weeks, he'd come home with different flavors of lollipops and different flavors of Capri Suns. That's all he did. And he let his son off the hook for every bad behavior. He went solo. He didn't try and correct. He didn't try and teach. And his son just opened up very, very quickly. And he said he remembers after about, 2 to 3 months of this lollipop and Capri Sun treatment or whatever, doing what his son had asked for, he said, "Love you, son." And his son said, "Look." And then he stopped himself because this was not his pattern. And he had to have a moment of decision. And he said, "Love you, Dad." And then he was telling me about this, and I said, "How long has it been since you asked for those numbers and asked for what else you could do?" And so then I prompted him, "Go ask for the next thing. Okay, what's the next thing I can do that will raise that number?" And his son said, "Take me golfing with you." And so he started taking his son golfing. And again, no correction, just being in that position of the humble leader that's proving to this other person within the relationship how he wanted the person to feel. We're mostly satisfied if we love. I love you. We're satisfied because we love. And so what I'm trying to do is get people to change their orientation to how much power do you have to make the other person feel it? If you can make someone feel your love, that brings you joy. Loving someone, especially if you've got a rocky relationship, brings nobody joy. But if you can overcome and gain mastery over yourself only, your joy will increase. And you will be encouraged to take the next step, to learn something else, to make those retakes. So in the office, I would say, set the foundation with everyone's buy-in. Then ask everyone in the organization that you work with, as leaders should do this, those 2 questions and 2 things, one in each category that they can work on. And then make retakes accompany something that you see often within your business. For example, "Hey, I told you I needed that on my desk at 2:00, and you'll just say, "Wait, let me do that again." And you do it right in front of them, and you come across in a way that you would want your children to come across, that you would want your employees to come across to each other, a way that you feel proud of. And If retakes are common with the leader, then eventually the subordinates, everyone else in the company, will follow suit. But if a leader alone does it, often that gets them out of those leadership lies. You owe it to me, or, I'm going to do this because I can. I can make you do things, and so I'm going to. If you get out of those type of lies, then you will see your influence expand greatly within those relationships, and you will see the people themselves expand. Just like I told you with the little kids, who the shy ones became friendly and the naughty ones became eager to learn. I mean, there's a vast difference if just the leaders will show the example.
Well, Heather, when their words go wrong, what is one question that you wish more couples, more friends, or teammates would ask themselves? What's a good question to ask themselves?
Do I want to continually ski on the bunny hill? Or do I want the freedom that mastery brings, the freedom and joy that mastery brings? Again, by yourself on that hill. And you have to start on the bunny hill. You can work your way up. But if you wait until someone does it with you, what I mean by bunny hill is we want other people to change so our part is easy. And so that's why we're always focused out. Oh, you make it hard for me because you made me feel defensive. Well, that's your black diamond. If they make you feel defensive, then you learn what to say in the face of that feeling of defensiveness that can change the tide of the relationship. Another lie that I believed was that mud cleans mud. If you've got a negative and you approach it with a negative, you don't get anything clean. It just makes it worse. If you start off with, that was a rude thing you did, and there's no change, then what a person will usually do is to begin to say, you're so rude. It becomes generalized, and if that doesn't work, usually we go into, you're not only rude, you're controlling, and you're this, and you're that, and you're the other thing. It can only escalate. It's like, okay, maybe more mud will clean it up. Oh, let's do tougher and stronger and more authoritative mud to clean this up. Where a leader will be able to through their wording choices, kind of control the atmosphere of a relationship and turn something negative into a positive.
Well, a common theme in much of this, again, is self-awareness. Heather Linchenko, thank you so much for joining us on Leadership. Heather's wise counsel reminds me of one of my favorite C.S. Lewis quotes. He said, "You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending." Heather reminds us that words are never neutral. They either build bridges or burn them. So here's a challenge for the coming week. Choose one phrase, one conversation, one moment to pause, listen, then respond with more mindful intent. Because leadership and every relationship isn't just what we do, it's how we speak and how we show up. It's not just what we say, but how we say it and how it lands. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with your team, your network, or anyone else who's ready to make better use of their time and attention. And be sure to leave a review. Even a single sentence fuels the algorithms that promote the great content that the Leadership podcast offers. And for free resources to help you in your leadership journey, go to leadership.net. That's leadership.net. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and spread good cheer wherever you go. For Leadership, I'm Roger Dean Duncan.